hello and welcome to In the Growth Space. I'm David McGlennon and I'm your host. Really excited for this episode today. I've been waiting for quite some time, and I'm just really excited that I get a chance to have a conversation with Dr. Tim Elmore. Now, some of you may have read a book of Dr. Elmore's called A New Kind of Diversity, and it's a book that he wrote a few years ago. I've got a copy of it right here. We talked a little bit about it on the podcast here today. But let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Elmore, because he has a new book coming out that we're going to be discussing in this episode. So Dr. Tim Elmore is founder of Growing Leaders, and that is at growingleaders.com. And that's an Atlanta-based nonprofit organization that he created to develop emerging leaders. And so you know my heart about emerging leaders. I love developing and working with emerging leaders. And his work grew out of 20 years of serving alongside Dr. John C. Maxwell. So you know I love Dr. Maxwell as well. He has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, USA Today, Psychology Today, and he's been featured on CNN's Headline News, Fox Business, Newsmax, and Fox and Friends to talk about leading multiple generations in the workplace. He's written over 35 books, including the book I just told you about, A New Kind of Diversity, making the different generations on your team a competitive advantage. Now, his latest book, called The Future Begins with Z, 9 Strategies to Lead Generation Z as They Upset the Workplace. And that book releases this week, and you can find that work on timelmore.com. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with him. I think you're going to really enjoy his perspective on leadership and how we can work with this Generation Z. And I'm just really excited for this podcast. So let's go ahead and get into that conversation right now. Well, hey, Tim, great to have you on the podcast. I've been really looking forward to this for a long time. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be with you. And I'm also looking forward to this conversation today.
Oh, that's so great. Well, I know that we were introduced by my good friend, Jeff Hancher, and I know he's your good friend as well. You wrote the foreword for his new book.
Yeah. He's a good man all the way around. And I love it when he makes connections like this.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, we were talking before we hit record about your new book. And I'm just kind of curious, what led you to write this book? Because just a few years ago, you wrote a book you called it A New Kind of Diversity, and it's really all about the generations in the workforce.
Yeah.
What led you to focus in just on Gen Z?
Well, it was my getting around to business after business, sports team after sports team, wherever young and old are together. And I'm just seeing a prevailing frustration among people who are over 40 with the emerging worker coming onto the team. They're just coming in different. And sometimes, David, they're different, not because they're bad. Sometimes they come out of college, they've never had one full-time job. So they're wearing flip-flops nose ring, whatever. None of that's bad. It's just like, oh, wow, they have never been in a professional environment. And sometimes they have to be reminded this is not a college dorm. Right. This is a workplace, and we may have a board member come in or a client. So I felt like I needed to create a resource that would help leaders, especially, understand, connect with, and really lead this next generation, because they're about to disrupt the workplace, and we got to lead them well. That was my goal. Yeah,
no doubt about it. And it's interesting. I read in the pre-book or pre-release of the book, you told a story about somebody coming to work and it was their first job, and they're like, "Hey, when's spring break around here?"
Yeah. They do.
I thought that was funny.
Like that. Yeah. Well, and other questions come up. Like, for instance, I just talked to an HR officer who works at the NFL, actually in New York City.
Okay.
And she said one of her young team members responded to her email, which, by the way, requested a 3:00 meeting the following week on a certain day. And this young Gen Z team member emailed back and said, "Oh, that time doesn't work for me. Here's a calendar link to my weekly schedule, see if
Yeah.
you can fit into mine. Now, he wasn't dumb. It's just that
Right.
he'd never been in a professional environment. So it's easy to get furious instead of curious,
Right.
frustrated instead of fascinated. And
Right.
I'm really thinking this may not be a youth problem. I think it's a leadership problem that we're going to have to
Mm,
solve. They're going to make us better leaders. And that's what I'm
yeah.
pushing for. Yeah.
Tim, that's such a great perspective, and I guess what are some things that we as leaders need to do differently? You mentioned a couple of them right there,
Yeah.
but what do we
Yeah.
need to do differently, just in our mindsets, even?
Yeah, well, the thing I keep telling myself, because I'm an older, this is the 45th year of my career,
Yeah.
but I believe in the next generation. And I think really step number one, we need to make sure, are we approaching our work every day truly believing in
Hmm.
this next generation worker? And that's a
Yeah.
gut check because we
Yeah.
might say, if we were honest, not really, I'm
Yeah.
tired.
Right.
So we need to make sure
Yeah.
we come in with high belief and high expectation. But here's
Yeah.
another one. They represent the future. That is this Gen Z team member. Uh,
Hmm.
are we positioned for the future or more for the past?
Mm.
So in the book,
Yeah.
David, I list two columns on one of the pages. And
Mhm.
one is the traditional view of authority, and one is the next gen view of authority. So if you don't mind,
Mm.
let me offer
Please.
up a couple of those two
Yeah.
columns because this is a great evaluator, I think, for us who are
Right.
over 40. So the traditional view would automatically assume that my position gives me the right to influence. And
Mm.
by the way, that's
Yeah.
not wrong. If
Yeah.
I'm the boss, if I'm the president or the executive vice president, I have the right. They would say your connection to me gives you the right to influence. And
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's a point of view from the future. Are we willing to
Right.
do that?
Right.
We would say you ought to listen to the man at the top. They would say the person at the top should be listening to us.
Mm.
We might say, um, my great experience gives me, the right to lead. They might say your great experience might make you antiquated
That's
on,
right.
the future. And by the way, aren't both true? They are.
Exactly. Yeah,
So one
exactly.
last thought, and I'll let you volley back.
No,
Uh,
no, it's great.
we might unwittingly see our leadership role as a gatekeeper. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but think about that. The gatekeeper point
Mm.
of view is the leader is the broker of all the influence, the budget, the power,
Yeah.
the people. And
Mm.
they would say, you should see your role as a guide, not a gatekeeper. Be a Sherpa guy leading us up the
Yeah.
mountain, blah,
I
blah, blah,
love
blah,
that.
blah. So
Yeah.
anyway, it's not like rocket science, but it's a gut check for leaders because we don't know a lot about the future, but we do
Mhm.
know one thing. Generation Z is going to be there.
No
And
doubt
and
about it.
we don't have much choice but to say, let us lead well here. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and to me, it sounds like really what they're doing is they're turning upside down
yeah,
the whole model of
yeah,
traditional leadership of like that you and
yes,
I might know. And
yeah,
I think, that's a good thing when it comes to creating change for the future and creating that connection. I know
yeah,
that, and John Maxwell. So John always talks about how the how do we communicate? We have to first connect. And I think
yes,
that
yes.
they've got that. They've got that right.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So real quick, let me tell a story if you don't mind.
Please. Yeah.
Early in the book, I talk about Colin Webb, who has been a friend since he was in high school. He's only in his 20s now, but Colin was a smart high school student, got invited to go to MIT for college.
Wow. Wow.
So he's at this stellar institute. You can imagine when he graduated, he had a number of job offers. So he ends up moving from the Boston area to Detroit, to one of the big three, General Motors,
Okay.
great, great big, Fortune 500 company. Well, when he shows up, think about this, Gen Z,
Yeah.
he looks around and sees a relatively traditional model of, leadership and
Yeah.
work.
Sure.
So he starts coming up with ideas to make it better. Of course he does.
Of course. Yeah.
So he meets with his supervisor and says, man, we can do professional development better here. We can do this system better here. We can do this process better here. But his supervisor, while I'm sure he was a great guy, just shuts him down. He
Yeah.
says, I'm not, bringing you in here to come up with new ideas. You need to keep your head down, keep your nose to the grindstone, get your work done. Well, Colin says, I'm sure, yes, sir. But he goes back to his desk and emails the CEO of General Motors,
My
Mary Barra.
goodness.
Yeah. And he offers the idea. He says, Mayor, I got some great ideas here. Well, she emails back, David, and
Oh
says,
my goodness.
they're actually great ideas. Let me take them
Wow.
to my executive team. So in that situation, the problem wasn't the top level leaders.
Mm,
The executive team says, you're right. These are great ideas. But by the time those ideas made it down the organizational chart to the middle
yeah.
manager and the supervisor,
Mm,
died on the vine again. In fact, Colin's supervisor said, I told you, keep your head down, keep your nose to the grindstone. And by
mm.
the way, Colin was told you need to be around here 8 years before you even get to lead anything.
Oh my goodness.
Well, that
Wow.
was enough to pretty much rain on the parade.
Yeah.
Colin ends up quitting before the year is out, and I don't
Wow.
think he wanted to. He's
Right.
not a quitter.
Right.
He has since then started three companies, just sold one of them. He's
Wow.
doing quite well financially.
I'm sure.
He just emailed me with a new idea he's got for another company.
I love
And I'm
it.
thinking, here's my thought though, David. I'm thinking that company lost a Gen Zer that they didn't need to lose.
Right.
They've just been a little open to listen and maybe consider
Mm,
some improvements and some updates and upgrades. So
yeah.
I realize we can't do everything Gen Z wants us to do. I'm not saying
Sure.
that's the answer, but I do
Yeah.
think the answer's in the middle on many issues. And if
Right.
we're willing to lean in and maybe rethink how we profile jobs for this new
Mm,
generation, maybe
hmm.
we keep them longer and capitalize on what they bring to our organization.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up a thought for me as you're sharing. It's really to me it's about leaders being curious too
Yes.
and being willing
Yeah.
to change and to
Yeah.
upend, our vantage point.
Yes, that really is. In fact, I use some very pithy phrases. I say, we need to stop being furious and start getting curious.
I love it. Yeah. That's so
Stop
good.
getting frustrated and start getting fascinated with
Yeah.
this. So, if you don't mind, do you mind
Uh,
if I tell another story?
please, please,
Um,
Tim. Yeah, that's great.
I told this story in the book you've already read, A New Kind of Diversity. But Tony Pallasino was in his senior year of college when he got a part-time job at a paint store.
Uh-huh. Remember
He
those.
also that year got on TikTok,
Yep.
of course he did.
Of course
But
he did.
Tony has this crazy experience. He starts, after all of his shifts at the paint store, he starts posting on TikTok some recordings he made of him doing some very, very creative things on
Mm,
TikTok with the
yeah.
paint colors, mixing
Yeah.
colors and making vivid shades of blue and red and green and so forth. Well, within the first semester, Tony's TikTok account went viral. And when I say viral, by the time he had 1.7 million followers
Oh my
on
goodness.
TikTok,
That's
34
amazing.
million views, he realizes, oh my gosh, I need to take this to the executives here because this we can monetize this. We can
Right.
get clients. So young Tony, 21 years old, puts a little slide deck together and asks to meet with a leader, some leader there
Mm,
at the brand. But Tony does not get one leader willing to meet with him or listen to him.
oh
He
my.
doesn't get one set of eyeballs to look at his slide deck.
Mm,
Tony did get something he did not expect. He got fired
remember that
because
story.
those leaders were just sure that young man was stealing the paint or doing this on company time
Oh
or
my goodness.
he was distracting to the customers.
Sure.
So listen to what happens. Tony gets fired. He ends up graduating from Ohio University, moves from Ohio to Florida, which is where he resides now.
Okay.
I just checked, now has 2.3 million followers on social media, and he has started his own paint store.
Go figure, right?
I know.
That's
Now,
great.
I'll be the first to admit there's lots we don't understand about Tony
Sure.
and the paint store. But one thing
Sure.
I do think I know, they missed out on an opportunity to reach 1.5 million more clients and customers.
For
But it
sure.
was such a zany idea in their heads that they didn't get this new tomorrow that's coming from
Yeah.
20 something. So I guess what I'm saying to your listeners is I know it's crazy. I know it's zany. I
Mm,
know they're the most difficult generation to manage. 3 out of 4 managers say they're the toughest generation to manage. But if we can lean in and let
Mm,
them make us better leaders, I think they're going to bring tomorrow with them.
right.
I think in the land of tomorrow,
Mm.
they're the natives and we're the immigrants.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
I love that picture, Tim.
yeah, yeah,
So, tell me then, I guess, what are some of the like the myths that are
yeah,
propagated about Gen Z, and,
yeah,
and what are some of the things that maybe are reality, and then how do we
yeah,
adjust?
yeah, yeah. Okay, great question. I think one of the biggest myths I bought into, I'm telling on myself right now,
Mm.
was that they really don't want to work after all.
Right.
They did the school thing really well, but they're not doing the work thing really well. And you
Mm.
can draw that conclusion by watching how they leave right at 5.
Sure.
They will stay a minute longer. They're out of here, and you can draw the conclusion maybe they don't want to work. But in the focus groups, I had so many focus groups with Gen Zers, and then I
Mm.
surveyed over 2,000. Here's what I discovered. Well, let me just tell you one quick story. I
Yeah.
talked to one 21-year-old young woman who was working full time, and I said, there's a lot of bosses that think your generation doesn't want to work because you leave right at 5, and they don't really see the same work ethic that they have. And this young woman very respectfully said, Dr. Tim, can I tell you why I leave right at 5? I said, sure. She said, well, I leave right at 5 because I have to rush over to another job. I don't make enough money at this first
Wow.
one to pay
Wow.
the bills in Los
Yeah.
Angeles where I live. And
Wow.
then he said, after that second job, I rush off to take care of my mother who has stage 4 cancer.
Mm.
So suddenly I'm realizing, oh, wow, she may have a better work ethic than I do.
Right. Right. There's
Working
more to
until
the
9
story,
o'clock.
right?
Yes, right. There's more to
Mhm.
the story. And that's what I'm saying. Why don't we ask questions instead of
Yes.
assuming that we know the whole story and thinking they
Yeah.
don't really work well? I
Right.
think they're a passionate generation, but we need to tap into their passion and
Yeah.
maybe profile that job in a different way than it's a good way to build a work
Right.
ethic, son.
Right. Right.
So that would be
Yeah.
one that I would share. Yeah.
Well, and I think it was in your other book, New Kind of Diversity, that talked about sometimes as they were growing up, they saw the baby boomers or
Yeah.
the Gen Xers, and
Yeah.
they don't want to work the
Yeah.
same way as
Yes.
they
Yeah.
did, as we did.
Yeah. If I can be blunt right now with your
Yeah.
listeners, I'm a baby boomer who loves my job, and it's the central part of my identity, I'm afraid.
Yep, I'm with
But
you.
they look at older generations and go, "Yeah, Dad, but you ruined our family. You were married to your job, not my mom."
Yeah, I
They're all the right, but
100% guilty as charged.
yes, yes. So they would
Yeah.
go, "You live to work, I work to live," and it's a
Yeah.
reaction. So
Yeah.
maybe the work-life balance requirements they have that we don't understand, maybe it's a reaction to us or
Hmm.
our generation. And maybe the answer is in the middle again, rather than just demanding they be like us. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and so those are some of the kind of the myths. What are
Yeah.
some of the I guess the strengths? Because I'm hearing
Yeah.
that there's some real strengths if we'll open up and if we'll
Yeah.
ask the right questions and be curious
Yeah.
and not furious.
Yeah. It's so true. So I talk in the book. In fact, the whole foundation of the book is built on an item that I call the Peter Pan paradox.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's about, I'm about to give you the strengths they bring. So if you remember the Disney movie Peter Pan, or you saw the play or read the book way back
Yeah.
100 years ago,
Yeah.
Peter Pan is this amazing character, right? That
Yeah.
flies into London. We're not quite sure how he does that, but he flies into
He
London,
does. Yeah.
sprinkles pixie dust everywhere, and amazing magical things happen. If you remember the other side of the coin on Peter Pan, he wanted to live in Neverland, where
Hmm.
boys never have to really grow up. In fact,
Right.
that's the whole reason they stay there. I don't want to grow up. Does this not sound slightly familiar to many, not all, but many of the 59 million Gen Zers? So something magic and tragic is happening in culture. And
Mm.
here's what it is. The age of authority seems to be decreasing. They're coming
Mm.
in with magical skill sets and abilities that we don't have. Think about Tony and his
Yeah.
TikTok account. Think about
Yeah.
Colin and how he had his ideas. So authority is going down in age because they don't need a badge to come in with their intuition, on smart technology and how to use it.
Right. Right.
They're coming in with a savviness to AI. I just talked to the folks at Coca-Cola who said we're using Gen Zers to tell us how to capitalize on AI because they know
Right.
it.
They
And
know
I
it.
don't
Yeah.
know it. I mean, I know it's out there, but I don't know how to use it. So this is the Peter Pan thing. The age of authority is going down. We need to invite them into meetings. We're not asking them to lead the meetings. We're saying, tell us what you know and that we
Yeah.
can use here at this company.
Mm.
But here's what I would also say. The age of maturity is increasing. In many ways, age 26 is the new 18.
Yeah.
What we
It is.
once expected at 18. You're ready for the military, you're ready for a job, you're ready for it may not be they're ready. Their social and emotional skills are behind. Maybe
Mm.
because they didn't get to socialize when the pandemic was going on and they
Sure.
did school from a screen. So
Right.
I'm not excusing their skill sets. I'm explaining their skill sets. So
Right.
here's the bottom line. I think leaders need to listen more than we've ever listened.
Mm.
We may need to coach more than we've ever coached to make
Yeah.
sure they're ready to play that role they can play on our teams. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, it was interesting to hear you talk about the maturity level or the maturity age going up, and at the
Mhm.
same time the authority coming down. And I guess then too, it kind of talks to me about emotional intelligence. Like, how do we
Yes. Yes.
help this generation to kind of come up in their emotional intelligence? And I think you hit it on the head. It's really about giving more questions and asking more
Yeah.
questions, and
Yes.
and really coaching more.
Yeah, it really is. I won't go long on this, but the shortage right now, I'll be honest with you, for all generations is EQ, not IQ.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
cognitively we're fine. I think Gen Z brings in cognitive skills
Mhm.
because they've been exposed to so much information in
Right,
preschool, to be
right.
honest with
Yeah,
you.
right, right.
But it's not IQ a problem, it's an EQ problem. So
Yeah,
self-awareness, social awareness, self-management. I'm telling you, we're going to have to work with them on their interpersonal skills.
sure,
Maybe
sure.
we need to onboard a little bit more thoroughly and
Mm,
build some of those people skills into their lives. They're great
right,
on the phone, but maybe not, not interpersonally face to face.
right.
So I do believe onboarding and retaining Gen Z will be building those skill sets that maybe we assume were already there 25 years ago, but they're
Yeah.
not there now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that's something that's really interesting to think about, because I work a lot with emerging leaders, and
Yeah.
this is why I really was interested in having this conversation, is because I want to be able to know, how do I help them, and how do we as leaders help
Yeah.
them, but also help ourselves too, and help our
Yes. Yes.
organizations. Because if we're going to be successful in the future, we've got to
Yeah.
be able to help them and help ourselves as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Quick story that didn't make the book, but I remember just discovering this in my research. There was a coal mine disaster that took place decades ago. You may not have heard about it, but it took place in Nova Scotia. But when a coal mine collapses, almost always people lose their lives. Coal
Mm.
miners, men
Yeah,
mostly.
yeah.
Well, when this happened way back in 1958,
Mm.
there were 175 men inside this coal mine, and 74 died immediately. It was just
Mm.
so tragic.
Wow.
So there's 101 guys left, basically,
Yeah.
and they were eventually rescued, at least the survivors. All but one survived. But here's the leadership lesson they learned after the rescue. They said, we noticed there were two kinds of leaders inside this coal mine. The first kind were ones that focused completely on solving the problem. So at once, leadership is about problem solving. I mean, you would admit that
Yeah,
that's what
absolutely.
leaders do. In fact, the
Absolutely.
fastest way to earn leadership is to solve
Solve a
problems.
problem. Yeah,
Here's
exactly.
what they noticed, David. They noticed those ones that were focusing on solving problems were very curt. They were very short-tempered.
Mm. Mhm.
They weren't patient. But you know what? You didn't need a badge or position. Just tell me, Bob, what do we need to do?
Right, right.
But along the way, when they noticed some of those ideas to solve the problems weren't working, people grew hopeless and
Mm.
anxious. You can
Mm.
imagine you're in a dark
Yeah.
place and there's no hope in sight. A second kind of leader emerged, and it was the one with emotional intelligence. It was the one
Mm.
that focused more on serving people than solving problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be the first to admit both are necessary. Solving problems,
Right.
serving people, solving problems, serving people. But here's what they noticed. These people were instilling hope. They were
Mm.
saying things like, don't give up. Your wife's waiting for you outside.
Oh, wow.
You need
Mm.
to stay encouraged, stay encouraged. And they were
Mm-hmm.
offering words of encouragement. And I know that sounds like platitudes and silly, simple, but don't you know today, in our anxious world we're living in, that emotional intelligence is so necessary.
Mm.
We're not in a coal mine, but we're in an office right now. And some people are not hopeful. They're hopeless. They're
Mm.
anxious, not
Yeah.
you get the point. I can stop
100%.
eloquent. But
Yeah.
I'm saying if we can instill that into Gen Z and then teach them to instill that in others.
Mm-hmm.
I remember John Maxwell said to me in my 20s when I started working for him, where there's no hope in the future, there's no power in the present.
Yeah.
And that is spot on. And
So
so if we
true.
don't see hope, we've got to somehow instill that. So I will stop
Yeah.
there. I'll let you continue, but I bet you've
No,
got
that's
some,
great.
you're a great leader yourself. What goes through your mind when you hear that?
Yeah, I think there's that opportunity in different situations for different styles of leadership.
Yes,
Because what I
yes,
hear you,
right.
because you're right. I mean, there are times when if safety's involved, we've got to be, directive and
Yes.
it, no
We're not
fluff.
holding a focus group right now. Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly. But
yeah,
then there are times when we really need to
yeah,
connect with somebody and understand how they're feeling and understand how the emotions are building up within them and just understand that doesn't
yeah.
necessarily mean we'll agree with everything, but
Yep,
we
that's right.
also have to understand that. And
Yeah,
I think that we were talking earlier before we started recording about our good friend Jeff Hancher,
yeah,
and one of the things that he wrote a book that you wrote the forward to, give it about giving feedback in a
yeah, from
fragile
people.
world.
Yeah, right.
And I think, I guess one of the things that I was going to ask you is how do we kind of run both sides of the
Yeah,
leadership equation there? Like, how do we give feedback to this generation that can be fragile and
yeah,
yet we also have to run a business and make sure that they're understanding and even understanding like how do I manage these emotions that are
yes,
within me.
yes. And still get the job done, which I heard
Right,
you say. So you're right on. We're managing and stewarding the organization. We're also
right.
managing, stewarding the lives of humans who may
Yeah,
walk in anxious.
right, right.
So it's really, I think, the $64,000 question. What I'm seeing is that Gen Z, not all but many of the 59 million, are coming in a little fragile. But I believe, David, that humans are naturally resilient. I
Oh
think
yeah, 100%.
parents,
Yeah,
teachers, and coaches have made them fragile,
yeah,
which has led to a cancel culture.
yeah,
We want to cancel things on the
yeah,
university campus when really civil debate is exactly what we need on that university campus,
yeah.
right?
Right,
And
right.
by the way, this is a parenting tip right now. I think removing hardship is rarely the right answer when a young
Yeah,
person is facing hardship. It's build them strong enough to face the hardship.
yeah.
Um, I'm telling you, David, right now, in some cases, they're weaponizing the term psychological safety. Um,
Really? Oh wow.
Remember Amy Edmondson out of
Of
Harvard
course.
said,
Yeah,
build psychologically safe places.
yeah,
They weaponize it by the first time their boss starts offering hard feedback, they think it's harsh feedback and they go, oh, this isn't a psychologically safe place. And I'm going, no, no,
uh,
no, it is. In fact, the fact that we can have our conversation
yeah,
and nobody gets fired means it is safe here. So the
yeah,
advice I give, and I'll try to do this in a Reader's Digest soundbite, I have an acronym on that particular chapter,
yeah.
and I call it ALEG, ALEG.
Okay.
Taken from this is the leg you got to stand on when
Right,
you have
right.
conflict in the office and it's
Yeah.
not going well. So the letter A reminds me instead of telling them they need to be corrected and here's what you should have done, instead of that, we need to ask
Mm.
questions. Don't tell them what they did wrong. Ask questions. What was your thought process when you made that decision?
Hmm.
When I ask someone questions, they feel valued.
Right.
I'm the
Absolutely.
boss and I'm asking them what they think. Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's nice. The letter L is listen well. I think it does a little good to ask a question if I'm not willing to listen.
Right.
So when I listen, they feel heard, which, by the way, is the top item Gen Z is asking for when they start a new job. I want to have a voice from day one.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be heard and not
Yeah.
told that you have to pay your dues or earn your stripes or whatever.
Right.
So
Right.
when we listen, they feel heard. The letter E is empathize.
Mm.
That's a learned skill on my part. I had to learn to show that I'm understanding and empathizing with them. So I might need to learn to say, oh my gosh, I bet that made you feel horrible. Or,
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, I had no idea that happened to you when you were 12 or something like
Mm.
that. But when I empathize, they do feel understood. So think
Yeah.
about the three steps I've just taken. Ask, they feel valued.
Yeah.
Listen, they feel heard. Empathize, they feel understood.
Yeah.
Now
Wow.
I have earned my right to guide them, which is the letter
Yeah.
G, to actually
Mm.
guide them, which, by the way, David, it's what I wanted to do in the first place,
Right.
but
Right.
I wanted to use my badge, not the bridge that I just
Mm.
built relationally.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what I would say to people. Earn your right to say hard things through a bridge, not a badge. And I
So
think
good.
you'll win the hearts of Gen Z right away.
Yeah, that's so good. I think that is as I think about just that acronym,
Yeah.
starting with questions
Yeah.
is I think is so powerful anyway. As a leader, if we
Yeah.
can ask more questions and then listen really generously. My dad used to have this, saying, I'm sure you've heard it, use, what God gave you in proportion, two ears and one mouth, listen twice as
That's
much as
right.
you speak. And
Yes.
I think it's wise advice for all of us today,
Yeah.
but I love the acronym because it helps us to remember really the things that are important. And
Yeah. Yeah.
the last thing about being guided, I think that's when I think about leadership, I think about guiding rather than, sledgehammering
Yes.
or just telling people what to do just because I have
Yeah.
the authority.
Yep. No, you're right on. In fact, I'm going to confess a sin here. I, I have noticed that the more you know, the harder it is to listen because
Yeah,
you immediately remember, oh, I know the answer. And we
right.
raise our hand and they're going, you don't need to lecture me anymore. Can I
Yeah,
just say something? But
yeah.
isn't that true? The more you
It's
know,
true. Oh, it
oh
is. Yeah.
my gosh. So
Absolutely.
that's me as a leader. That's me as a dad. That's
Yep.
me as a husband.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
anyway.
Well, and so oftentimes, as we have a little bit of, I call it getting having runway behind us,
Yeah.
we feel like we are that sage, and so we've got so
Yes.
much
Yeah.
to offer.
Yeah.
But being the sage on the stage, so to speak, is not really where this generation needs help. They need to have us guide them, kind of come alongside them, and be the
That's
guide on
right.
the side. And
Yep.
I
No
think
doubt.
that's so powerful. There was a story that you brought up in your book that I thought was really interesting, and it was about NASA landing Apollo 11 on the moon and the average age of the people that were in the control
Yeah.
room. Talk about that for a second, because I thought that was I never thought about that. That's fascinating.
It was so encouraging and fascinating to me as well. So everybody remembers at least reading about the moon landing in July of 1969,
Yeah,
where NASA did something we had never done before. Nobody had
yeah,
done it.
right.
Put Neil Armstrong on the moon. The backstory though was fascinating. So when John F. Kennedy twice made a speech predicting we would put a man on the moon by the end of the decade,
Yeah,
NASA did not even have the technology to do such a thing. So they were
right.
scrambling in the early to mid 60s, bringing in new technology to do this moonshot.
Hmm.
Well, you can imagine by bringing in all new technology to pull this off, the 55 to 65-year-olds that were running the show did not even, they didn't understand this new
Right,
technology,
right.
but they're bringing on interns from MIT and Purdue and Georgia Tech and Texas
Yeah,
Tech and Louisiana Tech. So these young 20 somethings are coming and going, oh, I know how to do that, or I know how to use that, or I know how to turn this computer on or whatever,
right,
you know.
right, right.
So by the way, can I just push pause and say, does
Sure.
this not sound strangely familiar? Oh my gosh,
Yes,
AI
100%.
and so forth.
Yeah.
So these experienced people that were 45 and older started becoming sim soups. simulator supervisors. They were
Okay.
mentors to these young men mostly that were coming in right out of college. So they had
Mm,
20 somethings in charge. So, real quick, here's the numbers. The average age of the control operators was not 57, it was 27 years old.
wow.
And
Wow.
the young man that actually pulled the proverbial trigger, Jack Garman, who said go, not no, to the 9 different segments that needed to say, let's do it, let's do it, let's put the capsule down on the moon. He was a guy named Jack Garman who was 23 years old, just
Wow.
1 year out of college.
Wow.
Now, what they
Wow.
learned was these young, sharp, they were baby boomers back
Yeah.
then. They
Yeah.
was
Right.
the boomers were the new kids on the block.
Right. Right.
They were 20 somethings, but they were more poised than expected, and they had a great belief that they could pull off a miracle.
Yeah.
And really, if you stop and think about it, the guys in their 50s and 40s, they might have gone, "Oh no, we shouldn't risk it. Let's don't do
Right.
that. We're,
Right.
we're tired." So
Yeah.
I'm having fun with you now, but
No, it's great.
I know I believe we need to do it again. I
Yeah.
don't know, leaders listening, what your
Hmm.
moonshot is right now, but I actually think the next gen might be the answer. We need to assume our role as coaches and mentors and
Yeah.
supervisors, but we need to believe in this next generation. And
Yeah.
let's put a man on the moon again in
I
our
love
own
that.
industries and companies. Yeah,
I love that, Tim. And to me, that's encouraging because I think so oftentimes the news and everything we read, talks about all of these negative things about the next
yes,
generations that are coming up. Quite honestly, that's exciting. I mean,
yes,
you
it
think
is.
about what is the next moonshot? Maybe it's Mars. I don't know,
Yeah,
but
right.
whatever it is, it's going to be exciting, and we need this next generation.
Yes, we do. They will make us better leaders because they're not going to put up with the stuff past
Right.
generations put up with.
Right.
Uh, the quote I'll close with here, David, it's my favorite quote in the book. It's by a friend of mine. Her name's Teresa. She said, Tim, Generation Z is the sandpaper on my leadership that I did not know I needed. Isn't that
Oh,
awesome?
that's so
It's true.
good.
It's true.
It's so good. Oh my goodness. Tim, this has just been so delightful. Thank you so much for just sharing a little bit about your book. I want to make sure that our listeners go out and get the book. When's it available? Where's it available? Tell us all about that.
Yeah. Well, it's available November 4th, so it's in.
Got it.
Uh, the place to get it if you want bonus materials for free is actually the book title, thefuturebeginswithz.com. Thefuturebeginswithz.com. Or you can go to Amazon, Maxwell Leadership,
Yeah,
HarperCollins, and get it there. But I'm hope. Thanks so much for this conversation. I want it to be a
absolutely.
tool in the hands of leaders to better leverage, not just tolerate this next generation of workers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I just want to give a little bit of a commentary to our listeners because I know that there are a lot of emerging leaders that listen, and you've
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
been part of the Emerging Leader Academy. And
Yes.
really, what I want you to be able to do is go out and get this book so that you can help all of the leaders in your life, baby
Yeah.
boomers, Gen X, millennials, because it's going to help you as well. And
Yeah.
if you're a baby boomer like I am, I want to encourage you go out and get this book because
Yeah.
we need to be able to ask more questions. We need to
Yes.
listen more generously. We need to have empathy and be that guide on the side. So, gosh, Tim, this has just been so powerful, and thank you for being here. I'm really grateful.
It's my pleasure, David. It's an honor to be with you. And I do love what you just said. Gen Zers, go get the book. It's going
Yeah,
to give you the other side of the coin, maybe on the older generations,
yeah,
millennials, Xers, and boomers. And maybe we can pull off a miracle yet.
absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Tim, for being here, and thank you, listeners, for listening in to In the Growth Space. Be well.